About a month ago, we started a journey through a field, the parable of the sower, and I just want to read those verses because we've been looking at that in detail, and today we finished that up. But in chapter 13 of Matthew, Jesus tells a parable, and then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and birds came and ate it. Some fell in rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell in good soil, where it produced a crop 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. He who has ears, let him hear. The Son of God has been sowing seed all over the world, and he's been doing it from the beginning. And the seed gets different receptions. Different types of soil represent different types of heart. And sometimes the seed grows up in places where you think it would never grow. I learned a couple of weeks ago that in Iran, more people have come to Christ in the last 10 years than in the last 20 centuries. So God, and you're hearing, of course, about the whole ISIS thing and the persecution and massacre of Christians in there. Part of what's sparking that is because people are coming to Christ. Muslims are coming to Christ by the tens of thousands. So the gospel seed is out there, and it's being sown, and it's bearing fruit. Sometimes it falls on the path, and sometimes our hearts are like the path that have been trampled on and packed down, and we want to receive the seed, but we can't. It can't get past the surface, and it doesn't take long before the enemy comes in and snatches it away because he does not want the gospel seed to grow in our hearts. He wants to do anything he can to prevent that. Sometimes it falls on the soil that is shallow, and it seems to spring up quickly like there's a lot of hope there, and it looks very promising. But because there's something hard beneath the surface, there's the rock beneath the surface, the efforts to put down roots are unsuccessful. So it springs up quickly, looking like, oh, this is going to be a great harvest. But as soon as a little bit of persecution comes, and persecution comes to every single Christian's life, that's inevitable, that's normal. It doesn't mean you're outside the will of God when you're being persecuted for Christ. It might mean you're in the very center of the will of God. But because the seed can't put down its roots, as soon as a little bit of persecution comes, even the heat of the sun, which is actually necessary for plants to grow, as soon as it comes, the plants wither and are unproductive. We pray for God to answer the promise of Ezekiel to take from us the heart of stone and give to us a heart of flesh. God does heart transplants. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God. And then we came to the thorns last week, which grew up and choked out the plants. And sometimes our hearts are like that. It seems okay, but before long, there's stuff growing into our lives. You know what I mean? Stuff just beginning to take over. Maybe busy schedules. Maybe just clutter in our lives. Maybe unattended business. Maybe relationship fractures. Whatever it is, the stuff begins to grow in and chokes out the life of the plant. So it cannot bear fruit. It's barely lucky to stay alive, and it's utterly impossible for it to bring forth any fruit. And thorns are painful to deal with. They are hard to deal with, but we have to face up to having the thorns extracted and removed from our lives. We have to make the decision to cut out from our lives those things which are okay when they're keeping us from those things which are best. Does that make sense? And sometimes the gardener does that, and sometimes it hurts a little bit. But we need to be willing to let go of what is keeping us from a life of full devotion to Christ so the harvest can come. And then finally, we come to the fertile soil. The fertile soil is just soil. Pretty amazing, huh? I figured that out. It's not poisoned by thorns. It's not polluted by rocks. It's not packed down by passers-by. It's just soil the way God meant it to be. And part of what we need to understand is fruitfulness being good soil isn't us becoming like somebody else so that we can be fruitful like they are. It's God working in us to make us who we really are, who He always intended us to be, so that the fruit can come forth. Does that make sense? It's not a cookie cutter thing, stamping out images to be something that you're not. It's God removing from our lives everything that keeps us from being fruitful. And so we have soil that bears a crop. Now, why does you plant a lot of seeds from year to year, don't you? And why does a farmer plant seeds? It's a pretty tricky question. To grow a crop, yeah. When we drive down to 113 through Knight's Landing heading south, or driving back that way, earlier on there were the rice fields that were all kind of flooded, and then the green rice plants coming up through the water, and it's just, and if I'm getting this wrong, straighten me out. But anyway, they're popping up, and it's just very beautiful and lush. But that wasn't why they were planted. The good soil isn't there so people can walk by and say, wow, what a fruitful life. You really have your Christian act together. I am so impressed by you. What's your secret? The fruitful soil is fruitful so that it can bear a crop, so that it can feed the community, right? It has a purpose. In the same way, God cleanses our hearts. He purifies us, not simply so we can say, wow, it feels so good to be clean and pure. I mean, that's wonderful, but it's so that He can produce a crop through us to feed others. The spiritual gift, spiritual purity, the growth in grace is not for our own private consumption. It is for the feeding of the needs of others around us. Because you see, the world is starving. The world in which we live is starving. People around us are desperately trying to fill the void with almost anything. I read an amazing, startling statistic a couple days ago in a Consumer's Report magazine that every day in America, 46 people die of overdoses from opioids. 46 people a day, whatever thousands that comes up to per year. In other words, they're dying not from illegal drugs, they're dying from legal drugs abused. People are trying to fill a void and emptiness inside. Drug abuse, legal and illegal, alcoholism, drunkenness, all of these things, sexual immorality, all of these things are the attempt, materialism, the idea that if I could just accumulate enough stuff, and it's deceitful, it's a lie, it's a disappointment. It is people trying to fill the void in themselves that only God can fill. And the needs are so great, in fact, that it's tempting to think, just what can we do? I mean, really, look at the world around us. Do you think we can really make an impact on this world? Yes. The answer is yes, even though I didn't clue you with my expression. The answer actually is yes, we can make a profound impact on this world. We can turn this world upside down. That's the kind of power that is at work in us. And yet we look at, what have I got? And look at how great the needs are. And it seems like, you're hearing about all the forest fires up there along the border. Well, tomorrow morning I'm going to get in the car and go up there with my squirt gun and do what I can. Right? It's absurd. Sometimes it feels like that. It's like, what can I possibly do to make a difference? It's like fighting a fire with a squirt gun, or it's like taking a few pieces of bread and trying to feed the thousands. Maybe we're onto something here. We don't have to figure out how to make the bread go far enough to feed the multitudes. What we need to do is to figure out how to get it into the hands of Jesus so that He can give it back to us to give to them. Isn't it beautiful? The farmer takes the seed, puts it in the field receives the seed and gives back a bountiful, 100-fold return. 5 loaves of bread are given into the hands of Jesus, and given back to the disciples to give to the people, and 5,000 men plus women and children are fed. There's 1,000-fold plus return on that. Jesus says they do not need to go away.
Amen.
They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat. What? Isn't that awesome? You give them something to eat. So we take what we have, we put it into the hands of Jesus, then receive what he gives for the sake of others. This account of the feeding of the 5,000, the gospel reading from today, is so important that God has it in all four of the gospels. It's not unusual to have an account in the first three gospels, the synoptics, but this one shows up in John too, because it's really, really important. And I want you to notice that in this reading, it tells us that Jesus takes, blesses, breaks, and gives. He takes, blesses, breaks, and gives. That is profoundly important. And for the early Christians, they would understand, this is pointing to something. In fact, this is what we do every single Sunday morning. When I make the appeal, as I'll do in just a little while, I beseech you, therefore, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, that you present yourselves, literally your bodies, as a living sacrifice to God. That's sort of an invitation to do this. And it's an invitation that all of us together present the totality of who we are as one single offering, not as a bunch of offerings, but together as one single offering we present to Christ so that he can take it, bless it, break it, and give it to the needs of the world. I mean, it's exciting to me that this this account is talking about what we do every single week. It's why we do it every single week. In the Eucharistic prayer, we talk about Jesus taking, blessing, breaking, and giving. And in fact, you'll notice that at a certain point in the service, a couple of people will come down carrying the wine and the bread. And then behind them, a little bit later, will those come down the offering. That is a powerful symbol to say that what happens here is Jesus taking what we present to him, blessing it, breaking it, and giving it back so that it's enough for everyone else, not only those in this room. This really opened up to me this week, and I think it's an important principle. We don't come here just to eat and kind of stagger on home to sleep off the blessing. We come here, Jesus feeds us, but did you know that there were 12 baskets left over? Did you notice that? So there was enough not only to feed the multitude, but to take out into the community or to partake of as each one of the individual disciples. We come here to be fed so our own souls will be nourished, yes, but we come here to be fed so that we can take what we've been fed and feed the needs of those around us. It's a profound and I don't know. That obviously doesn't excite you like it does me, but that just excites me all to pieces. You don't need to send them away. You give them something to eat. And I'm going to give you here, Jesus says, what you need to take out there. Wow. Wow. Thanks be to God. The fully surrendered field is abundantly fruitful. The bread of Jesus is enough to satisfy all. They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat. And he gives us precisely what we need so that we can do it. Thanks be to God. Amen. Amen.